Everyone, and welcome again. Like Zini said, my name is Tabitha Subdeo, and I am Iris's development manager. So I am going to share a link in the notes in the chat section, and then what I'm going to do next is share my screen. Okay, so what you'll see is this question, and this question is, what town and state are you calling from? So if you click on the link, you'll just be prompted to write your name in and then just answer the question, and we'll see the results in real time. Okay, we have some Hartford, New York, New Haven, Ridgefield. Okay, California, wow, we got an LA, okay. Connecticut seems to be representative quite well. We'll give a couple more responses. West Hartford, okay. Atlanta, Georgia, welcome Atlanta. Torrington. Okay, very cool. Middletown, but a native of Kenai, Alaska. I think I said that right. Great, this looks awesome. Okay, so we got a Stanford. Alrighty, I'm going to go on to the second question, so stay on that link. The second question is, where was the first refugee you met from? So think of the very first refugee you ever met, and where was that refugee from? We already have 2 entries for Iraq and Iran. We have 4 results so far. Syria. Somebody drawing? Kosovo. So you'll see the words will get larger as more people are saying their results. Wow. Afghanistan, Syria, Congo, Romania. Seems like Iraq, Iran, Congo. Oh, Vietnam. Wow, Zimbabwe, Palestine. Great. This looks awesome. Okay, so we have 20 results. So I'm going to go on to our last and final question. And this question is, have you ever read a graphic novel style book? This is a yes or no question. Wow. Okay, it seems pretty half and half. Okay, so we'll stop there. We have 65% yes and 35% no. And with that, I would like to pass it on to Iris's Executive Director, Chris George.
Thanks, Tabitha. Welcome, everyone. Wow, it is great to see everyone's faces. What a great collection of people. So this is once in a refugee resettlement agency's life opportunity to host a conversation with 2 Pulitzer Prize winning people, an artist and a journalist, Jake Halpern and Michael Sloan. I'm gonna kind of set the scene, and then we're really gonna let them do most of the talking, along with someone, Naji Eddaban, who is from one of the Syrian families. October 20th, 2016. October 20th, 2016. I got a phone call from this guy named Jake Halpern, and he introduces himself. He's a writer, has done some work with the New York Times and other publications. And he says he's got this idea that he's been discussing with his editor at the New York Times of doing a graphic style narrative, a kind of comic strip, but not very funny, a comic strip running in the New York Times Sunday Review section that follows the life of a refugee family, preferably from Syria. And he wants me, the director of the local refugee resettlement agency, to find him a family. So 2016, remember what's going on then. The campaign for president is reaching a fever pitch. Refugees are being vilified by one of the candidates. All of us involved in refugee resettlement are wishing that more elected officials would step forward and defend this great American tradition of welcoming refugees. All of us involved in refugee resettlement are kind of wringing our hands, saying, oh, I wish there was more public support for refugees. I wish Americans knew more about refugees. I wish refugees were seen as human beings, a lot like us, instead of these abstract aliens coming in to invade our country. And here, with this phone call from Jake, was an opportunity to really humanize refugees. So part of me said, great, let's jump on this. This is a great opportunity. But there's another part of me, the director of a refugee resettlement agency, that was thinking, you know, refugees need their privacy. It's also a matter of safety. Can we really push a family to be written about, their names used, their images used? Wouldn't that be a risk? Wouldn't that violate some of our policies? And I had a couple of conversations with Jake. He discussed it with his editor. And in the end, we figured, yes, it could be done. Protecting the privacy and safety of the family, changing the names, not even mentioning that it's happening in Connecticut. So I said, look, we have a couple of families. There are actually two families arriving at the same time on November 8th, Election Day, 2016. Did I get that date right? Was it November 8th? Nod your head, Jake. Was it November 8th? Yeah, November 8th. I said, we got these two families, their brothers and their families arriving at the same time. And then again, you know, the sort of the public relations journalist part of me says, wouldn't it be great if you could be there at their arrival? But then I immediately think, oh my gosh, we don't allow journalists to come to arrivals of refugees. What am I saying? So, well, you can be there, but not be there. Great. So we agreed that they could come to the arrival, stand back, not be intrusive, and that was the plan. So I think I'm going to pass it over to Jake and Mike to continue the story. For us, it was a great opportunity to put onto a national stage, the New York Times, no less, the story of a refugee, two refugee families coming to the United States and going through the resettlement process. And of course, I had to trust the journalists to do a professional job and to abide by the guidelines. And Jake and Mike not only did that, but they really went far beyond. They were constantly checking in with me to make sure that what they were putting in the script was accurate, and you know, not just sugarcoating everything. There were some pretty heavy, bad things that happened in the course of this resettlement, and of course it had to be told. It was part of the story. And in the end, I think it is an example of really what we really need more of in refugee resettlement, is great storytelling about these families that have fled persecution and are starting new lives in the United States. So Jake, do you want to take it from there?
Thanks, Chris. So, yeah, just to go back to that night of arrival, it was election night, and we, our own organization, the New York Times, had assured all of you loyal readers that it was 92% certain that Hillary Clinton was going to win. So it was set up to be an uneventful night, though we know that's not how it played out. Our immediate challenge was one of consent, which was I wanted to make sure the family was on board with this. So the agreement that we hammered out with Chris was, hey, we'll show up, we'll watch their arrival, and then I'll circle back, like, 3 or 4 days later on my own without Iris, and propose the idea of following around the family and tell them they're free to say no. And if they said no, we would just try to find another family who agreed. So anyway, we show up the night. These two brothers, Ibrahim and Isa, show up with their respective families. They had been in Jordan for several years. They had fled the civil war in Syria. Say a quick hi to them, and they go on their way. They disappear into the night. So I go home, and by 10 p.m., the election isn't playing out the way everyone said it would. And I'll never forget, I'm sure like many of you, I woke up in the middle of the night and I checked the computer and saw the Times headline, Trump triumphs. And one of my first thoughts was about this family. And I thought, oh my gosh, this family has basically landed in one country and is going to wake up tomorrow morning in another country. And suddenly the timing of their arrival had these really tectonic implications because they were arriving just as this, massive transition was occurring. And the politics stood to play out for them personally because they had family that was still in Jordan and the door had now shut. It wasn't totally clear, but it was, pretty obvious that it was going to shut, and it did, therefore separating the family. So I knew that it was potentially a great story. The question was the family going to agree? So I reached out to a friend of mine who's a local architect in town. He's a Syrian American. And Chris had suggested to me, and he was quite right, don't just go with any Arabic speaker, go with a Syrian, so that there's that kind of cultural connection there. So I told my friend who agreed to translate for that night, will you go with me and meet this family? And he said, Jake, yeah, I'll go with you, but I'm going to be honest. I think it's a long shot. You don't speak Arabic. You're obviously not Syrian. You're not Muslim. You're a Jewish guy. They're not going to trust you. Also, because coming from Syria, journalists were often agents of the state. It's a big ask. And he said, even for me, who is Arabic, who is Syrian, who is Muslim, and I've reached out to refugees, often it's taken me a long time to connect with them. I mean, he was so pessimistic, honestly, that I almost said, forget it, but not quite. And in any case, I went to visit both brothers, Isa here in New Haven and Ibrahim, who at the time was in Manchester. And really, I got very, very lucky because both brothers welcomed me into their homes with open arms. And I'm going to kind of pivot here because one of the members of the family is joining us. He's a young man named Naji. And as a journalist, I would say every once in a while, the gods of story hand you a gift of someone who is open to telling their story, is emotive, will share their emotions, and it just has a kind of shining quality to them. And that was Naji. Even though from the very beginning, he was young, I think he was 14 at the time, and his English wasn't that good. We started talking, and his father, Ibrahim, is the one that brought me into the house and started telling the story right away. So I'm going to cut to Naji here. Naji, do you remember the first time that I showed up at the house in Manchester?
Hi. Yes, it was a very tough time, especially coming to the United States and hearing all this on the TV, and suddenly this guy comes and he says, "Oh, I want to write about your story." It was kind of a tough decision, but at the same time, all the news we heard and how people are misunderstanding refugees and saying bad things about them. So we thought that this could be a chance to show people who really refugees are and what do they go through and what do they look for. So Jake come here. Yeah.
Naji, tell us a little bit about what you had gone through. You had been in Syria. You fled there because um, Homs, your town, basically fell into civil war, and you ended up in Jordan. Well, first of all, tell us a little bit about the crossing, the night you came from Syria into Jordan. Would you tell us a little bit about that for those of us who have no idea what that might be like?
Yeah. So, we're living our life just like any other family. We had our family, close to each other in the same neighborhood, and it was great. We never felt as safe, and we were going to school. My dad had his own phone store, and then we had our own house. So it was, great. We were enjoying it, and suddenly, people start protesting, and it develops so quickly that you just have to hide, and they start shooting outside. They started bombing houses. Um, First couple months, and then they took my dad to prison for 40 days, and I was at that age 10 years old, and that really changed my life. And as we say in the story, it stopped me from being a child anymore. At the age of 10, I had to run away from gunshots. I had to bring food for my family in a place where there's no stores. If you walk, there's a pretty high chance that you will get shot. So I had to go through all this at the age of 10 and see my dad behind the bars. It was all a crazy time, and it wasn't easy. So then suddenly my dad comes out of the prison, and then he says, next time I would rather them shooting me than catching me again. So that really made us feel that we're not safe anymore. And the next thing they think about is going to a different country. And as Muslims, we can't go through the airport because of, they'll say you're running away. And my parents decided to go through the border in Jordan, and it was at night, 12 o'clock in the midnight. We had to go walking. Um, it was a very, very bad timing. At the same place, the day before, people were going through that place, and 9 people died. They got shot. So we knew that before we actually start walking, and that was the only choice for us. And my parents didn't have any other choice. So either we live and we go through this road, or we could have gotten shot. So we went to Jordan, and thankfully we crossed. It took us about 2 hours from 12 a.m. to 3 a.m. in the morning. It was so cold, and we had to pick our own backpacks, and we had to sit in a tent in the middle of a desert. Yeah, you can go ahead, Jake.
No, so and just to give you some context, Ibrahim, Naji's father, was picked up by the Assad security forces in one of these random sweeps. It's not like he was a criminal, had broken the law. It was just part of the state's crackdown on people. And Naji, when his father was in jail, was the guy responsible for going out in the streets and getting food for his family at the age of 10. All right, so Naji, you escape this, you end up in Jordan, and tell us about what your life is like in Jordan. Are you able to go to school and have a normal life there, or no?
So in Jordan, we went, and for the first couple days, we stayed in camps. It was very difficult. I mean, you can't imagine yourself living in a tent between thousands of other tents and in the desert. So my parents thought, we have to move to the city, and we moved to Amman, and that was in 2011. So we went to Amman. We rented a house. First thing we know that we're not allowed to work. So my dad didn't have an idea where he's gonna pay the rent from and where we're gonna eat from. So somehow they made it work out. We had some money from Syria that we spent, and we stayed in Jordan for 5 years. My sisters and we all started going to school, and suddenly, I had me specifically as a boy. I had a lot of problems in school. So kids would come and beat me every day. Teachers would beat me, saying for homework, missing homework or anything. But I knew because they didn't like who I am or where I came from. So it was, every day I would go to my dad and say, hey, I got hit today. And my dad wouldn't be able to do anything. I mean, a Syrian refugee in Jordan, if they go to the police station asking for help, there's a big chance that they send them back to Syria because they're already filled with refugees, and that's why they don't allow them to work so that they live on their own. So, I came the other day to my dad and said, "Hey, this kid, three kids hit me, and one of them, punched me on my stomach." And he got really mad. He said, "That's it, sit home. I don't want you to be beaten every day." And so I sit home for 4 years, around 4 years. I didn't go to school, and yeah, my parents sitting home, no job, no future. That's how it was in Jordan, thinking that we ran away from Syria to a better place, and we had to go through a lot in Jordan, bullying in the streets just because we're a refugee from Syria. They would say, "Oh, you're taking our jobs, you're taking our houses," and it was just so tough that suddenly when they called us and said, "Would you like to go to the United States?" we felt so happy, like like in the darkness you have a candle. This is how we felt coming to the United States. It was like future opening up for us, and we said yes, but you know we had some issues. As in the book it said, we had some issues between my dad and his family, how we might not all go together. So that's when we had the hard time too.
You're breaking up here a little bit, Naji. Just to kind of clarify what he was saying. So the family has this opportunity to come to America, but it's a very difficult situation for them because only some members of their extended family were given the green light. Naji's family, his father Ibrahim's brother Isa, but the mother, the matriarch of the family, said, "I'm not going to go unless everyone goes," and some of the other siblings hadn't been greenlit. So the family was in this really difficult situation. They see the election is close with Trump. Do we go now before potentially the door closes, but break up the family, or do we wait? It was not an enviable choice, and the family decides we're going to go. And Naji is the one that was really pushing. His dad said, it was difficult. I knew Naji wanted to go, but I felt terrible about leaving my siblings behind. Naji, can you hear me, Naji? Do we have you, or do we lose you?
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, yeah. Naji, when you left Syria, you left Jordan, you had birds, right? Can you just tell us about the pigeons that you had to say goodbye to in Jordan?
Yeah, so in Jordan, I'm sitting home, nothing much to do every day, just waking up to eat and going back to sleep. So I decided to have some birds, and I got, um, I think I had 14 pigeons, and I made a small house for them, and I used to feed them every day. It was, something to look for. And, saying goodbye to all this at the same time, so excited to come to the United States. I'm gonna miss my pigeons. I'm gonna miss, like our culture. There's mosques all around, the people that we speak the same language.
but we had to leave that for the the better future in the U.S.
Right. So you say goodbye to your birds, you come to the United States, you land, and then you wake up and you're in this new country where we have a president that is put in this refugee ban that breaks you up from the family. And in fact, Issa, Najee's father, tells this really heartbreaking story that they landed, and the next morning he gets a message from his mother. This is actually how he finds out the result of the election, and it says, "Ibrahim, now that Trump has won and become president, I hope I shall live a long life because I may not see you again." And the finality of this is just really hard for the family. So anyway, I start kind of following them to their life, and with the help of Iris and their co-sponsors, and also honestly the family, which was just enormously resourceful. I often say to Ibrahim, you didn't get lucky that you made it to America. You made it here because you are so able and resourceful. That's how, that's how refugees survive, is because of their wits. They start acclimating and things are going well. And then they get a call one day. Ibrahim gets a message on his voicemail with a death threat saying that the family, if you don't leave this town, we're going to kill you. And the family is, I'll never forget this, Najee. Do you remember came to your house that night and I brought some ice cream? You guys were pretty well. What was that like for you?
Yeah, it was just a breakdown for us and for what we thought.
Najee, I think
came to.
Najee, I think
To
it's
me,
hard
it felt like
are you guys having I'm hearing Najee?
Place
Yeah.
safe
Hey, Najee.
on the planet. Again, it we're never gonna be.
Najee, I think you should log back in because we're having a hard time hearing you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I think we're having a hard time hearing you, Najee. So why don't you log off and then log back on, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. In the meantime, while Najee's gone, I'll talk to you a little bit about what's happening from the journalistic point. I'll turn really at this point to Michael. So week in, week out, we're following this family, and it's a rocky road. As you can see, the family gets this death threat. The FBI is involved. They're uprooted once again. Chris is trying to pitch in and manage the situation. It's quite challenging. And then every week I'm going there and taking notes and observing it. And then a graphic narrative is appearing in the Times. So it's all being chronicled in real time. And the way we did it was I would report, I would write up basically what I witnessed in dialogue form. I would go with my translator, very carefully going back over it with the family. Is this right? Did you say this? And they were enormously generous with their time in sitting down with me and letting me be a fly on their wall. And then once I had that weekly write-up of what had happened in their life, I would then turn to Michael, and it fell upon Michael to turn this kind of improbably into a comic, into an illustration that encapsulated what had happened during this week with this family. So at this point, I think actually it would be nice. We have a little video that Michael put together that shows his end of the process. So can we share that video now?
Yeah, one sec.
Hi, I'm Michael Sloan. Jake Halpern and I are the team behind Welcome to the New World, a graphic novel published by Metropolitan Books. I'd like to share the process for creating the artwork for the book. First, I create a full-page pencil sketch based on the edited script. I map out how many panels will appear on the page. Then I put Jake's text in the speech balloons so I can see how much space will be left over in each panel for the visuals. The next step is to create the final art. I ink the black lines traditionally on Bristol board, scan the art into Photoshop, and finally I add the blue color and the text. Well, that's a quick look at how I created the artwork for Welcome to the New World. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoy our book.
So we got a little bit ahead of ourselves because you see now the comic
right.
strip became a book. But Michael, talk to me about your end because every week or so you're under a deadline journalism. I'm giving you this script. What was it like for you on a week in, week out basis to create this story visually?
Yeah. Can you all hear me, by the way? Okay. I'd been working as an illustrator mostly for newspapers and magazines at that point for about 25 years. So I was used to dealing with very tight deadlines. I had done a lot of work for the New York Times op-ed letters column, which is typically an assignment that I would get at around noon or 1 o'clock in the afternoon and need to finish by 5 or 6 o'clock the same day. So stressful, tight deadlines were nothing new to me, but this project really surpassed that in a lot of ways, mostly because of the amount of work involved. Usually I would get the edited script from Jake and the Times on Monday. And originally the turnaround was to get the final art to the Times on Thursday, although in the end we realized that Friday morning would work as well. And I estimated that for each 8-panel comic, it took about 40 hours of work going through usually 2 sketch stages, one which I didn't show to anybody because it was really just for my benefit to map out Jake's text and where it would go in each panel and then how much room there would be left over for visuals. Then a second sketch that I would submit to Jake and the Times for approval before I worked on the final art. There really wasn't that much time for a think. Because I was responding intuitively. There's so much happening in the story. The stories were so compelling. I realized right off the bat that this was a once in a lifetime opportunity. Jake and I had also met and we got along really well right away. We hit it off professionally and I consider Jake a friend, which was very fortunate. I mean, that doesn't happen all the time. But the way that the story developed, I think that for me, the death threat sequence, which came about halfway through the episodes, Jake, is that right? It was emotionally hard to work on that kind of subject matter, to see the family suffering, to know what kind of turmoil they were going through.
Yeah, it was hard for I think the family and for me. I mean, it was an odd situation where it made for a powerful story, but
oh yeah,
it was hugely upsetting for the family, and it triggered a lot of the trauma of what they'd been through.
I remember, Jake, you said at one point the trauma of their present circumstances brought up the trauma of the past, and I remember that.
Yeah, and I think that throughout this process, the chances that this would work seemed very improbable, that Chris would take the risk to let us try this. And then quite honestly, that the family would let us in for such a sustained period of time. And, I like to say is that this whole project was born in a moment of profound distrust, of a fear of the other, of a divide, of us and them, of a campaign issue being predicated on the wall that separates us and keeping out. And, the Aldebans had every reason not to trust all of us. And as did Chris. I mean, who knows which way this is going to go. And yet they, in classic Syrian form of hospitality, invited us into the house. I'll never forget, Najee, I don't know if you're back, but the day your father and mother invited me to the house, you sat by my side, and every time the teacup was even a quarter left empty, you filled it back up. And we navigated this process together. And I'm a bit honestly as proud of that as I am of the finished product. I want to tell one other story. Najee, are you back? Not sure whether he's able to get back in.
Yes. Yeah, I'm back.
You're back. Okay. So Najee, I'm really proud of how your family is doing. That's actually a really big moment in their life. Can you just tell us what your family was just able to do? In terms of where you live.
But when we met, Oh, okay. Like now, they,
Oh shoot, we're losing you again, Naji.
can you hear me?
Yeah, a little bit. Try one more time.
Okay. So are we talking about now in the US
Yeah, in the
or in
U.S. Like, tell
Jordan?
us where you're joining us in from today. Tell us about the house that you're currently living in. Okay, I might have to just jump in and do this.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So they this house uh, yeah.
I think we're having a hard time hearing you, Najee. I might
Yeah,
just have.
I just posted it.
Okay. Najee, you would do a better job than me, but just for the sake of audio, I'm going to go ahead and just wrap this up. The family just bought a house, which is of course like the ultimate realization of the American dream. And two things struck me about this when I visited them most recently. And by the way, this is 4 years in now. I've never followed a family for so long, or anyone for that matter. Ibrahim, the dad, told me, Jake, the first thing I insisted on doing when I had my house, I visualized doing it. And when I got the house, it's the first thing I did, is I put the American flag up on the front door. And it's funny, it's a moment in this country where some people feel like there's not a lot to feel patriotic about. But when I showed up at the house and I saw that family in their new home and I saw that American flag unfurled on that front stoop, it really did remind me of what I am proud about in this country. And this isn't me, the journalist, speaking. This is just me, the person, that we are a place where a family like the Aldebans can come, and with the help of Iris and the help of the other volunteers, can kind of claw and pull their way up into this new life. And it's never going to replace the life that they have lost. But it is a new life. And the thing that also touched me is when I went to the backyard of the house, they'd only been there like 2 days. I immediately saw the bird coop where Najee had built for his pigeons. And I knew how much that must have meant for Najee. I know that when he was in Jordan, like, the pigeons were his friends. He wasn't in school and he left them. And here they had this home and he had his pigeons out back. And it's not an easy road for them. They're still scraping by. Najee's working he was working 40 hours a week. He's trying to cut back so he can go to school. Ibrahim and Adiba, the mom and dad, are both working. I mean, they're clawing, they're eking it out, but they are doing it. And they're, if you can let me proselytize for a second, Chris, their persistence and their example is one that we would do well to remember when people are vilifying, the kind of freeloaders or the takers that are supposedly coming in. So anyway, I couldn't say all that when I was a Times journalist, but now I can. I think we've exceeded our time. I'm going to pass it back to Chris.
Great. So I want to just mention a couple of things. So 2016 was Iris's craziest, busiest, most hectic year. We welcomed 530 refugees that year in 2016 compared to 230 the year before. So it was a very busy time for us. We also were able to welcome so many refugees because we had so many community groups step forward as volunteers to take families into their communities. And that was the model that we used with these two families. They were not just met by Iris staff, and I have an incredible staff, and they would have done an incredible job of resettling them, but they were met by two community co-sponsorship groups, one from Manchester, one from New Haven, and those groups did a terrific job. If we had any doubts about how well these volunteers would have welcomed and resettled refugees, if we had had any doubts about these volunteers, I would have been crazy to introduce them to a New York Times journalist. So it it's an example. If the theme of today's talk is trust, it's yet another example of the trust that a refugee resettlement agency has in volunteers who are well trained by a trustworthy staff, and they do a great job. So a round of applause for those volunteers. Many of them are on the call now. I also want to recognize Sarah Kraus from Refugee Council USA, Lisa Raffinelli from Office of Refugee Resettlement, a government agency that supports refugees. And I think also Jessica Chapman is also on the call from another refugee organization. So let's open it up to questions. Anyone have any questions? Raise your hand and we will recognize you.
Yeah, I'm sorry about the bad connection. Now I'm back.
Hey, thanks, Naja. You're back on your phone with a
Yes.
stronger connection.
Yes, yeah.
Great.
So Chris, I put a message in the chat to everyone. If you want to type a question in there for Jake or Michael or Naji, we can handle your questions that way. Might be the easiest way to go about it. Or if you want to physically raise your hand or show your technological prowess and see if you can raise your hand using the Zoom function, but it's probably just easier with this number of folks to put a question in the chat or raise your hand and we'll see you.
Great. Okay, it looks like Laura Utschall's got a question.
Okay, great. Laura, I'm going to unmute you. Yeah, there you go.
I did. I just want to say I had a chance to read the whole book. I saw it in the Times. I heard you at Foot School. And it's just a very, very powerful book. I am going to buy it for relatives. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart because it's such a meaningful and deep message, and the family struggles are really, really documented. And Naji, thank you, and thanks to all the families, honestly.
Absolutely,
all the
thank
work
you.
that went into it, all the continuing relationships. And I know I speak for a lot of people, but the book is amazing.
Thanks, Laura.
Really great. Thank you.
Great. So it looks like we've got a question in the chat, and then we also have Adeline who has her hand raised. Adeline, we'll come to you next. If we can just take the question from John, which was a question from Michael Sloan. And
I'm fine. I got here early.
oh, there's a question. Sorry about that. I just had to mute that. Michael, did you visit the family too, or did you base your illustrations on Jake's reporting?
I did not visit the families. I would see them once every few months. I based all the work on Jake's reporting. I think we decided early on that it was best if only one person would go to visit the families so as not to overwhelm them. And that person would obviously be Jake, because he's the journalist. We had decided with the Times that we wanted to hide the identities of the family by changing their names and not make the characters actually appear as they do in real life for security reasons. So it wasn't really necessary for me to show their true likenesses or to show exactly what their home or their apartment was like where they were living. I created that. I made that up.
Great, thank you.
So I have to ask, quick question, Naji,
Yeah.
were you happy with the way you look in the book?
Yes, yeah, it was great. You know, I was really surprised. I would never imagine how everything would look like this realistic.
Uh-huh.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jake and I really made an effort to do justice to all of you and to your story, because I always had the hope that, you would read the story and your children's children would read the story, and they'd be able to go back and say, this is how our family arrived in America. I always had that view in mind and wanted to make sure that we did it right.
Yeah, no, you did a great job. Thank you, Mike and Jake.
Well, thank you.
Adeline, you had I'm going to go ahead and unmute you.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
I want to say that I was part of a group, a community group that was resettling a Syrian family in Connecticut around the same time as this reporting was happening. And to read these strips in the Times was such, you got it exactly right. It was like you weren't writing about our family, but it was almost like you were writing about our family. The issues that were presented, it was just extraordinary to have that reflected in the New York Times as we were going through it here. So it was just a great job.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I'm going to just, I guess, respond to it. I think the whole time that we were working on this, I was deeply worried that I would get it wrong. There was so many things to get wrong. The process of it, also just not being Syrian and having the language barrier. And so poor Naji can attest to this. I would call them up again and again and again and again and ask them questions, but also there are a number of volunteers, like co-sponsors like you, who were under enormous pressure to make this work. You see the Times this Sunday, actually, the book is excerpted. It's going to be a full page in the Times. And the excerpt is all about the 4-month window. And you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. This 4-month window of arrival to self-sufficiency. And it's hugely stressful for the families, but it's equally stressful for the co-sponsors because they have to get this family up to speed. And I talked tons with Judy Durham and with Jean Silk and later on with Nancy Lateef and Ruth Goldbaum and all of these enormously resourceful, incredibly dedicated people that Iris has wisely co-opted and brought into the process. But you all bore the brunt of that. And I know that I don't know your story, but I'm guessing that there were many sleepless nights, many like 60-hour weeks. And if not for you guys, these families would be in a much worse situation. And so we did try our best to capture that, but it really makes me feel great to hear you say that because you always worry that maybe you're going to get it wrong.
Can I jump in and mention something? The whole refugee experience was something I'd never had any experience with at all in my work before I started working on this project. And I learned so much. But one of the things I learned is that there's this entire organizations, groups of volunteers and co-sponsors who you don't really necessarily hear about, who are helping to support the organizations like Iris and also the refugees themselves. And I got a whole new appreciation for those people and the work that they do. So yeah, here's to you.
Excellent.
Right. More questions. Anne, do you have them?
Yeah, Karen B. We noticed that you have your electronic hand up and
Yes.
you're upside down in your video. So you go ahead.
Oh, well, I don't know how to change that.
That's okay.
I'm just going to be upside down. That's a good place for me to be.
Now you're right side. What's your question?
Yeah, our group, Start Fresh, in the New London area really cheated because we were we didn't get bound by the 4 months thing. And I know Chris knows all about this, but even today, we have a couple of families that we are constantly working with. Like Naji, you got into school, I assume, and you did well. We have several of our families that are doing terrific, but we have others that are just struggling with school. And I'm wondering if you have any comments on that.
Yeah, I could imagine that, especially being refugees for a long period of time without going to school. That could really affect people who didn't go to school. I mean, for me, my dad made me learn 10 words in English every day, all the years that I've been without a school. For other kids, they might have not did that, so that makes it really difficult.
Can I actually ask a follow-up question to Naji? you know, I've said this to you many times before, but I'm going to ask you again. You went through some really hard stuff. You saw some stuff at the age of 10 that no one should have seen. That you're out of school for the longest time. Then you got bounced around with the death threat here. And yet you are one of the most optimistic people I have ever met in my life. You are just an incredibly positive person.
Thank you.
And my question is how is that possible? Could you help us understand that?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it all depends pretty much on the family, pretty much on the relationships and the mindset. Once, you know, you say whatever happens to you and whatever God puts you in after a whole issue, you just have to keep going towards your goal. You can't, you know, if we moved from this house from Jordan to America, my goal cannot change. It also has to be the same. That's how I think about it.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So thank you, Najee, and thank you for that question, Karen. There's a question here that maybe this is best put to Chris. It's from Maz, and it says, do you believe that more refugees will come in the future, whether or not there will be a change in the presidential administration? Chris?
Yes, refugees will continue to come. The question is, will it be a trickle of fewer than 10,000 refugees a year, which would be shameful for this country to bring in such a low number of refugees? Or will it be 100,000 refugees a year, which is really what the number should be every year? But it will never come to a complete stop unless something very unusual happens. Even under the current administration, there is enough support for the refugee program for at least a trickle of refugees to come in. I hope that answers your question. Of course, we're hoping for an administration that restores the refugee program to the level that it should be at, 100,000.
So the next question, thanks, Chris. The next question could really go to either Najee or Chris, I think. It's from Jeff and Jenny Lang, and it says, what is the biggest misunderstanding some in the US have about refugees? So maybe Najee, you could take a run at that question. The biggest misunderstanding.
Sure. You know, I went to school with different Americans, teenagers, different ages. They would all think that, you know, we were living in a desert. And that's a big thing, you know, camels and all that. That's one of the biggest things. And also, every time I talk to people and I would ask them, you know, would you go to the Middle East? They would say, oh, no, never. Because of the idea that the media is showing, you know, they're saying, oh, it's too dangerous. Some of them tells me, wow, do you really want to go back to the Middle East one day? Like thinking that it's, you know, a whole dangerous place.
Thanks, Najee.
I would have to say the biggest misunderstanding is the average American doesn't even know that we are bringing refugees to the United States through a public-private program. The average American has no idea that there is a refugee resettlement program. And that's why this volunteer approach, this community approach is so important. It spreads the word, gets the word out, so more and more Americans can not just know about the refugee program, but can meet refugees. I mean, imagine if millions of Americans could meet someone like Najee. We would have lifetime supporters of refugee resettlement. And no president would dare try to vilify refugees as a campaign tactic because they'd be shouted down by all of Najee's friends.
Thank you, guys.
You guys make a good combo for answering questions. I love it. So the last one is from one of our co-sponsors. This is a co-sponsor that is actually based in Stamford, Connecticut. It's Amy Ewing. So it's not one of the two families that sponsored Najee and his cousin's family. but Amy and her co-leader, Jean, is also on the call. But Amy, you had a question.
I just had a comment. I really appreciated the comic relief when Najee and his sister are talking in the car, and one of them says, "Why are all the sponsors so old?" And the answer is, seems like people here work and work. And when they get really, really, really old, well, then they take care of refugees. That's where I live.
That's beautiful.
So thanks for catching that, Jake.
That was, I remember those are those little nuggets where when you say it, you think to yourself, oh my God, you couldn't make this up. It's so great. Yeah.
Great. I think we have answered all the questions, but Chris, you want to wrap us up here? And of course, if you all have other questions, if you think of them afterward, please email Zini or myself. I'm Ann O'Brien at Iris, and we would love to have follow-up questions and get them answered for you. But Chris, you want to wrap us up here?
Yes. So the book is out. It'll be available in a matter of days. Is that right, Jake? Mike? Yes. So
22nd.
So
22nd.
we want to get this book out to as many people as possible, especially people with influence and power. Influence to help change people's minds, and people with power to actually have a decision, a role in deciding how many refugees will come to this country and the future of the refugee program. So any ideas you have on people we can send the book to, buy a whole bunch of them and distribute them to your friends, especially those, you know, with influence and maybe power. We'll be doing that. We also want to get it into the schools. And there is a teacher's guide that was produced by an organization in Boston. What's the name of that group, Jake?
The Immigration Learning Center.
So there's a teacher's guide that can accompany the book. Contact us if you want that. So this is the time to think about, you know, strategy. This is a great book. We know how powerful it is. It humanizes refugees. People who read it will learn a lot and hopefully will support the refugee program. So we want to get it out. Amy?
Yes, are you blanketing the libraries? For example, the Stanford Ferguson Library has co-sponsored with you and SIRS and sometimes others films about refugees. I'm sure if they ordered a couple of copies, they would feature it someplace, and I would think that we should do that with all the libraries. So is Iris doing anything concerted to try to contact the libraries?
We are libraries in schools, but please don't assume anything. Send us your suggestions to the same person who sent you information about this. Is that right, Ann?
Mm-hmm.
They can just reply to you. Okay, yeah. Great.
Exactly. And we're going to send a follow-up email to all of you and everybody that was invited, letting them know where they can get the book in terms of some Connecticut independent bookstores, as well as information about the learning companion book that will be coming out, so that, you know, when you encounter your teacher friends and your administrator friends of schools, you can let them know that there's a ready-made package to go with the book to work with their students. So we'll get all that information out to you.
I can also just tell you really quickly about some of the things that are coming up. This Sunday in the New York Times in the arts and leisure section, there's a full page excerpt of the book. Probably within the next week, Deb Amos from NPR, either on All Things Considered or Morning Edition, the national version, is going to do a great little story about the day that I delivered the books to the family and they saw them for the first time. There's also going to be a segment of the NPR show Rough Translation that is all about the kind of challenges of bridging cultural gaps and connecting with the family. And lastly, we've also teamed up with the Anti-Defamation League, and they have a program called No Place for Hate that's in about 1,000 schools. And we're working with them to have, there's going to be both a teacher's webinar in October on how to teach about refugee matters that the Immigration Learning Center is hosting, and then followed up by an event that's open to schools across the country in November. So maybe, Anne, I can send you the links, but we can send this out. If any of those things are interested to you, we'll follow up and help, tell you more.
Absolutely.
Great. So I just want to thank the IRIS staff for putting this together, and Tabitha, Zini, thank you very much. I want to thank all of the co-sponsors and other supporters of IRIS. Thank you very much. You guys do great work. This book is also a promotion of the co-sponsorship model. That's another reason why we want to get it out to a lot of people. And then most of all, we want to thank Jake and Michael for joining us and giving us the inside story about how this amazing project has turned into a book. And we want you to keep working on refugee resettlement. Okay, we'll figure out some more things you can do. A sequel.
It's going to be hard to find another family like the Aldebans, but if you provide them, then maybe we can talk.
Yeah.
And Najee,
I'm sure we can find one.
Thank you, Najee. You were the star of this Zoom meeting, Najee. Thank you very much.
Thank you all so much. Thank Iris for all the help. This is amazing. Thank you, guys.
So just one last little thing to mention, having this particular event on this day was really momentous for another project that we have been really fortunate to work on, and that is the launch of a special fund called the Catalyst Fund, and we'll send information out in our email follow-up to you as well. But that's actually a fund with one of our partners, Open Society Foundation, Refugee Council of USA, and the Shapiro Foundation, that's actually going to support other resettlement agencies across the country who want to develop community co-sponsorship programs like the one we did with our co-sponsors. So anyway, it's just a really, really great day all around for this incredible book, and hopefully developing even more support for refugee resettlement across the country, towns everywhere. So Michael and Jake and Najee, thank you, thank you, thank you. And for everybody that has shown up today, we really couldn't do it without everybody's involvement.
Yep.
Thank you.
Ken, thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.